My name is Aurélien Bompard. It's kind of hard to pronounce for English-speaking people, I know. Don't worry about it, I'm used to that. Say it however you want, it's all good. I've been in the CPE team for something like 10 years, just a little bit more than that. I used to work on very different things at the beginning when I joined Red Hat, and I used to be a Fedora contributor before that. I've been contributing to Fedora for basically the duration of Fedora because I joined actually a group of people who worked on Red Hat 9 before that. Well, I'm not going to bother you with all that, but I've been here for a while with various different levels of engagement. I also know that I sometimes speak too fast, so feel free to tell me to slow down. All right, FMN. FMN stands for Fedora Messaging Notifications. And that's the system that has been in place to centralize notifications throughout the Fedora project. Yeah, I'm younger than I look, but I won't give you the secret for that. That's only the secret sauce. So yeah, FMN has been written because we had a lot of different applications and they were all sending notifications to users, and didn't make sense to have different places to to do the same thing and copy the data over. So so we wrote FMN at the time. We wrote FMN at the time when FedMessage was just starting. And so FMN was based on FedMessage, and it was just centralizing all the notification, all the messages, and generating notifications out of that. We had a few problems with that. The old FMN, well, the first installment of FMN was kind of slow. It was slow to start up, and it was slow to operate. Last year, we did some benchmark, and we realized that there were notifications. Yeah, there is no slide yet. I'm doing a no slide thing, and then I'm going to share some graphics from my browser. It's going to be very old school. So yeah, it was kind of slow. We noticed that there were notifications sent to users something like even a day after the notifications were, well, after the event that generated the notifications. So it was very, very, very slow. And there was also another problem with the UI. The UI was quite complex, and I'm going to share what the UI looks like. I don't know if you've seen it yet, if you've used FMN. So I'm going to share my screen. Yes, that is obviously going to work, of course. Yes, that is the standard page for IRC notifications in the old version of FMN. As you can see, it is kind of complex. You have a lot of things, a lot of changes, twiddlings, things to do, things in red, things in orange, and that's just all the rules. And that's just standard rules. That's not even the more complex rules that you can build. So yeah, it's a handful. So that was one of the issues with this. And yeah, it's quite complex. And also, there was another thing that you couldn't see. The way that messages on the bus were translated to notifications was through a library called Fedora Meta something. And Fedora Meta, Fedora Infrastructure, for example, that was all the translation from messages, text messages, into something that a human can read. And that got outdated pretty fast. Because when people changed their applications, they changed the format of the message that they sent out to the bus. And so this library had to be updated, but it was only in the hands of the Fedora infrastructure people. So we didn't know about it, and we didn't update, and it was a mess. It got outdated really fast. And also we have moved away from FedMessage into Fedora messaging. So all that together led to us rewriting FMN as one of the big pieces, big software piece, still depending on FedMessage. So I'll show you what the software layout of the new system is. This is how it's architecture from a software point of view. Users are here on the left side, And they end when they connect to notifications.fedoraproject.org, they end up with a front end that is based on TypeScript or JavaScript, basically, and Vue.js. Vue.js is a front-end library that is also the library that is used by the new software, the new websites. So there is at least some knowledge that we can share with them, and with that we could share all together. This library makes calls to a REST API here, which is based on Python, and Fast API. Fast API is, let's say, it's a framework. It's a Python framework for web applications that is asynchronous and very, very fast. So we do that, and I'm going to skip this dotted line yet for now. Of course, we have a database, and that's PostgreSQL here. And the backend connects to PostgreSQL and also to a cache that is embodied by Redis. All the green is running in OpenShift. All the blue is running in the infrastructure, but not in OpenShift. And the purple here is external services. So Redis is running in OpenShift with the rest of the pods. And so that's what users see. And now you also have a second part running in the background, and that's the consumer. The consumer is based on Python. It's listening to the Fedora messaging bus for messages, looks into the database to match them with rules. It also heavily looks in the cache because we want to speed that up. We are running around, I think it's somewhere between it's somewhere like 1 or 2 messages a second on the bus. So of course, if you had to do tons of queries in the database, that wouldn't keep up. And the consumer, when it does all the hard work of generating messages, notifications, but it doesn't send them out. It just builds them and sends them out to a second virtual host on the RabbitMQ server. So it's not per se Fedora messaging because it's not on the same virtual host. It's like a different virtual host like you have on Apache, for example. So it's a private vhost where the consumer sends the messages that have to be sent out to users. And then you have consumers of those messages that are sending them to the actual services. For example, you have an email sender that gets the messages that should be sent to email, etc., IRC, and metrics. Why we did that? The reason why we did that is that you can only have one IRC sender because it's connected to the IRC server with a username and password, and IRC doesn't really like it when you have multiple accounts, the same account connected different times, multiple times to the same server. So you can only have one, but we wanted to be able to scale horizontally the consumer so that it can handle more messages as we grow. So the consumer is separated from the senders. All right, I think that gives you an overview of the new system, how it is laid out. That's from the software developer point of view. From a user point of view, it's a bit different. I'm going to get to that, but before I go to the demo, there is one more thing that I wanted to mention, and that's what I said about the Fedora message meta infrastructure thingy. In Fedora messaging, we have replaced that with schemas. So whenever an application sends a message, it can choose to send the message using a schema. The schema is a system that validates the message, but it also has a way for consuming applications to know what this message is about, what software packages it mentions, what users it's about, who created the message, etc., etc. And this information is what the consumer here uses to identify the message and, for example, match it up with a rule that has been done by user foobar on package baz. So the advantage of that is that this schema is in the hands of the developer of the applications that produces the messages. And this way, when you change the layout of your message, you can change the schema and adjust it so that it's still up to date. All right. All right, that's good. Let me show you what it looks like. You can connect if you want to notifications.fedoraproject.org. And that's, for example, that's my rules, the rules that I use at the moment. You connect with well, I'm already logged in, but you will have to connect. Yeah, I see people are talking about this hopping thing with the buttons that are invisible unless you hover over them, and it is quite annoying. But yeah, the buttons are there. You just don't know until your mouse go over it. So it's kind of like Schrodinger buttons. You only know where they are if you look at them. Anyway, you have rules, and let me add a new rule so I show you what it looks like. I'll create a new rule. You have a rule title that it's only for your own understanding purposes. You don't really have to set that, but you have tracking rules. And that's a major change from the previous version of FMN. In the old FMN, you could do so many things. You can do a gigantic amount of things because it was extremely powerful. And as a result, it was really hard to speed it up. So we have focused the new FMN into a system where you can only do a few things that we have built. There's like 7 or 8 tracking rules, but those things are really well focused and they should cover most use cases. One of them, the first one, is artifacts by user. So it's basically being notified about messages, being notified about artifacts like packages, modules, containers, Flatpaks, when they are owned by specific user. If I choose that, it's going to default to my artifacts, but you could very well get messages for artifacts owned by other users. For example, if I'm a mentor of someone who is just new to the Fedora project, I might want to have a look at the changes that they do in their artifacts. There are artifacts by groups, so it's basically the same thing, except instead of a user, you have groups that you can select. Well, it's going to get the groups, and you can select from there. Only the groups that you are a member of. If you want to look at things that happen in groups you're not a member of, you could request to join those groups. It would make sense. That's a perfectly good use case. So artifacts is just the name of the artifact that you want to have a look at. For example, let's say I want to have a look at artifacts named kernel. There's quite a few of them. Most of them are RPMs. I'm pretty sure there are. It's also going to look into the modules and the Flatpaks when you do that request. My events are events that are referring to me. For example, somebody added me to a group. It's not, I didn't do the action, but it affects me. So that's the sort of events that you will get if you use this tracking rule. And started by users are events that have been authored by other users. Again, if I'm a mentor of somebody that is new to the Fedora project, I might want to subscribe to actions that they do. So I can say, okay, that's a good thing, and that's a bad thing. That's a pretty good thing, but you could do better, etc., etc. And then you can search the username. So once you've chosen a rule, let me get a simple one. You can add destinations. In the previous FMN, let me go back to the old UI, you would first select the destination and then decide on the rules that you want there. In the new FMN, we have reversed it in a way. You choose the destination after you've chosen what you want to do. So for example, my events, I want to send them to this email address, which is my personal email address. I want to send that to IRC or to Matrix. And this information is retrieved from Noggin. So you can change that in Noggin. Well, not directly from Noggin, but I'll pass you the details. And you have severities. By default, all the messages on Fedora are sent with the info severity, but some messages are really not as important and will correct them to be sent at the debug info, and you could have more important severity. Let's say, for example, you want to get all that to your email address. Yeah, that's good. And you can add the action that you initiated. By default, it's not going to tell you what you've just did because hopefully you know about it. And you could select applications So this rule only matches those applications. And you could also filter by topic, but that's a pretty power user feature. Let's say I want to get all those all those to my email address, and I also want to send things on Matrix if the severity is either warning or error. That'll work. And so I'll get a lot more things on email that I would get on Matrix. That's one of the things you can do. And then you create the rule. I'm not going to do that because I already have this rule set up. It's right here. And there's also something about my artifacts. And FMN is also going to tell you how many messages the rule has produced in the last 7 days. That's a good information for you so that you can, if you create a rule that sends you tons of messages, you get tons of messages, but with this information, you can point which rule is generating so much and is spamming you. So Anitya and the new hotness are not exactly the same application. One is, I'll let Michal answer that question if he wants to, but that's two different applications that work together very closely, but not exactly the same thing. And all right, any questions about that? If you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat now. I'm going to check it out and hopefully not be distracted by oh yeah, Q&A. That's very interesting. I'm going to look at that. Yes, so the destination is being fetched from FAS. How do you add matrix on ASC? Same thing. First you have to create an account, and then you have to go to your account in Noggin, and you add that. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see those questions earlier. Artifacts is a generic name for things that we produce in Fedora. So there's RPMs, there's Flatpaks, there's modules, and there's containers. If you don't create any rule, you won't get any message. That's just the way it is. Okay, the other one is a question about Hopin, I think. Were there any unexpected surprises along the way of working the older FMN app and modernizing? Yeah, there was one thing that took us a long time to sort out. That's the communication between synchronous systems and asynchronous systems. We spent a lot of time setting up things. So Fedora messaging has callbacks to let a function or a class be receive messages, and this function runs synchronously. It's running in a thread basically, and so that is synchronous. But Fast API is asynchronous, and both of those components wanted to talk to the cache, so which was an async cache. But then we had to be sync for the consumer, and also the database that had to be synchronous and asynchronous with different entries into it, and that was very complex. So we sorted that out by defaulting to async, and that was one of the gotchas that took us a lot of time. There is no proper way to migrate the rules that you had in the old FMN to the new one, because it's very different. It's conceptually very different. The old one was letting you do so many things that can't be translated into the new one, that we'd rather let you build from scratch the new rules with the defaults that you have. So for the defaults, if you want to get all the messages that are going through the bus and might affect you, that will be a lot of messages. You will generate quite a few messages. We were thinking of generating a default rule that will be something like things that are about me and things that are my stuff, pretty much the thing that I've set up. But we didn't get to deciding that at the time. We don't want people to sign up for a Fedora account and then get tons of emails, because they will feel like they've just hopped into a gigantic mailing list and they don't know how to sort it out. They're just new and they don't have links to the proper places. So yeah. Yeah, how do we let users know that they will need to tune FMN for their needs? Hopefully the message, well, hopefully, not hopefully, I think that the message that you receive have a link to the UI on email. On FM, on Matrix or IRC, you don't have that because it's just much shorter, but in email, you should have that. When you follow a person, it's artifact option come based on person's groups and permissions, or is it the same event if a person is not a member of anything? It's the same thing, I believe. If I understand your question well, I think it's the same thing. Basically, if you are not a member of any group but packager, and you change something on an RPM, and I subscribe to your things, I don't have to be in the same group. I will get the thing. The missing, yeah, okay. Cochet is one of the missing applications that don't have schemas. The reason why applications don't show up in FMN is because they don't have schemas. And we have written schemas for a lot of applications, but not for all of them. And Cochet is one of the missing pieces. We didn't identify it as one of the most critical things that we should write schemas for, and that was a mistake. But no, I've heard about it, and I'm going to try to get somebody's attention to work on that. But so it's going to come hopefully soon. But yeah, I don't know exactly when. And when it has schemas and when the schemas are deployed, you'll be able to select it in FMN. So, any more Q&A? Maybe. How did Vue.js help with streamlining the front-end development compared to what? That's a good question. So the fact that we had a separate library, like a front-end library for the front-end, helped us focus the team into, well, not separate the team, but have two people mostly working on the front end, two people mostly working on the back end, and make sure that the communication between those two was correct. We have TypeScript on the front end, so we've built a small script that will get the OpenAPI spec from the backend. You know, a REST servers can generate an OpenAPI spec that tells you all the endpoints, all the types from these endpoints, and how you interact with them. And from that spec, we generate the types in TypeScript. So if you do that, then you're making sure, and then TypeScript checks that those types are coherent with your whole front end. So with that, you can make sure that the front end and the back end are using the same types, basically. And separating the team into two different teams that could move at their own pace was also pretty useful. So I think this Vue.js experiment, because it's like the first big web application that uses this for, at least for Fedora infrastructure. So I think that was a good experiment, and I think that worked. All right. Next question. So it doesn't alert you on logs. It alerts you on messages that go through the Fedora messaging bus. So all the actions that are done by either applications or users in the infrastructure, basically. And even outside, because we have bridges for GitHub, for example, and Discourse, etc. If they catch a bug, that's a good question. If they catch a bug, they can follow my mouse and go to report issue right here. It's kind of gray on the gray background, so yeah, it's not obvious, but it's there. And so this application is developed in a repository on GitHub and in the Fedora Infra user group. Well, it's called organization in GitHub, and you can report things there. And hopefully, we'll have people looking at that and sort it out. And well, if you want to have a look at Fedora messaging, you can also have a look at that. It's pretty interesting, and it's what the FMN is based on. And FMN is at notifications.fedoraproject.org. If you want to try it out. And if you have questions, you can reach me on Matrix. My username is abompard, ABOMPRD. All right. Any more Q&A? No, I'm new to this hopping Q&A thing as a presenter. So, all right. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and and see you around the release party.